Hope you're doing well today. It's February 26th. We are in Numbers. Numbers chapter 1. As it speaks about, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tabernacle of meeting on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel by their families, by their fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male individually from 20 years old and above, who are able to go to war in Israel. You and Aaron shall number them by their armies. And with you there shall be a man from every tribe, each one the head of his father's house. And so then it looks like this is supplemented by Moses. These are the names of the men. Either the Lord is calling them by their names, or Moses supplemented this as the census was taken. Might think about that, but then the remainder of the chapter, then you have the Levites who are exempted. Okay, our reading also included Leviticus chapter 27 today, but just looking in Numbers chapter 1. What points might we briefly meditate upon today? Well, one is this. It's that I think it's when we get into these lists of names, and you see it in the Old and in the New Testament, sometimes it's genealogies, sometimes it's, as Paul would sign off on a letter, thinking of Romans, where he would, greet them by name, it says. And the Lord knows. The Lord knew how many people there were. Why does the Lord say, take the census? I think there may be different answers for that, because we have not gotten to the point of the spies being sent to Canaan and coming back and giving a bad report. So this census that is going to be taken of all the armies, of all the warriors, we know what's going to happen to a lot of those warriors, and God knows what's going to happen. So that may be one reason that this may be a lesson about don't trust in your own might. But anyway, but at the same time, God knows. The Lord knows us by name. And that is a wonderful thing in the New Testament when it speaks about that. That the shepherd goes before his sheep and calls them by name. That the Lord knows us individually is a beautiful, beautiful thought to have. When the Lord spoke to Simon, that the Lord calls us by name. And he gives us a new name, Christian, as well. But he calls us by name. The Lord, as this census was happening, the Lord knows. The Lord knows who we are. The Lord knows who we are individually. But also, within the passage, let's make the point that we can also think about leadership. As we have take a census from 20 years old and above, that this is about leadership in the congregation. You have Moses, you have Aaron. Remember when they came out of Egypt, Jethro, and the account where they start appointing, right, when Moses was going to get burned out, and Jethro says, appoint men over this if it's satisfactory with the Lord, and that's what they do. Well, this is another place where you see this is leadership in Israel. This is leadership in the congregation. And so we see the need for that. And we also see leadership in families. And this is what congregations and families need. They need leadership. God knows. This is about God, leadership and accountability. God's going to hold them accountable. When we see the people falling in the wilderness, who is it who God holds accountable? Now, All of Israel is going to be wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. It's wonderful that God knows us, that God knew them by name, as the census is going to be taken. But as God knows us individually, God knows our families, God knows the role that He has given husbands, wives, children. God knows. God knows whether we are fulfilling our role in our families. God knows whether we are fulfilling our role in the congregation of His people. God knows us individually. And so we need to do our part. We need to do our part in loving the Lord, loving others. We need to do our part in serving. We need to do our part setting good examples for others. We need to do our part affecting others. Here in this chapter, sometimes it's easy to skip, these passages that are just about, here it's the census. But let's just make those applications. Because the song, when the roll is called up yonder, the Good Shepherd knows us by name. And the Good Shepherd knows us. And He says, my sheep follow me. They hear my voice. We don't follow a stranger, we follow Him. So, we think about our roles, our role, the role that the Lord has given us. Appreciate you. Hope you're having a good day as we think about applying these verses to our lives today. Hope you join us for our next brief look into God's Word.